Darkness falls across the ring when we hear the 10-bell ding. Creatures crawl, slither, and fly across the moonlit evening sky. Bump in the night, or one on a mat. I can hear the blood splash. Sports entertainment and a late night fright make for a fantastic Saturday night.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Wrestling Dead. My name is Paul Ponte. I am joined today by the natural one, Michael Modest, and we have a special guest. This one, a rematch of Beyond the Mat here. We have the shooter, Tony Jones, and now cut off the radio voice. No more of that intro nonsense. Tony, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Mike?
Fantastic, brother.
Thanks for having me, man. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. We're going to talk a couple things today. We're going to talk about The Exorcist, and we're going to talk about a guy you guys know very well, Mike Lockwood, aka Crash Holly. But we're going to get started with the movie here. Mike, I always start off with the same question. I want to know, Mike, why did you want to talk about The Exorcist? Of course, you know, besides the fact that it's one of the most iconic movies of all time, and not only horror, but pretty much any genre.
Okay, so you know how good I am at taking notes and everything like that, right? You've seen my notes before, you know, the little pieces of paper, okay? But I've sunk to a new low, all right? And it's because of The Exorcist. This is what I did, notes on The Exorcist. Like, and I realized this later. I was like, wow, this is a trip. You know, that The Exorcist is the one movie that I didn't at least have an actual piece of paper, you know, where it was just, this is like, it's garbage. It's like, I think the demon took a piece out of that right there, right? But I'm going to tell you why I wanted to do The Exorcist. Because The Exorcist, first of all, Tony and I, we have a really great memory of seeing this movie in a Magic, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, the Magic Johnson Theater in Compton.
I think that's right.
Okay. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to do it. Okay. Because it was at the Magic Johnson Theater in Compton, California. The other reason is because, you know, when I watch most horror films, when the movie is finished, I feel perfectly safe. Maybe it's a little scary walking around a corner, it's dark, or maybe when I, you know, turn off the lights, I think about it a little bit. But The Exorcist almost makes me feel like something bad might actually happen to me. Like maybe God doesn't even want me watching this movie, and maybe God's protection is kind of lifted off of me during this film. And I wrote one of the notes that I wrote on here. I was getting ready to leave the house, right? And I was going to leave within 45 minutes. And I thought, well, you know, I'll put on The Exorcist for a little bit and I'll watch 45 minutes of it because I like to always refresh myself. Of course, I've seen The Exorcist many, many times, but I like to refresh myself on a film before we do the podcast, right? And so I'm getting ready to leave the house, and I thought, well, I got 45 minutes to kill. Let me turn on The Exorcist. I put it on. I turn on Paramount streaming. I put The Exorcist in there, and it starts, and I fucking paused the movie, and then I turned it off. And I thought, you know what? I probably shouldn't watch this movie before I leave the house. Something bad might fucking. You know, I mean, that's how scary the idea and the fact that it comes from, you know, a true story, which, you know, embellishment is big in Hollywood, of course, everybody. But it's based off of a true story. And some of the things that happen in this film and the way it's filmed, it freaks me out, man. And so that was one of my notes. I was like, I have to write that I seriously thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to watch something else for 30 minutes before I leave the house instead of The Exorcist, because I don't want anything bad happen to me because I watched this like kind of cursed film, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to talk about it, man. I got a special memory with my brother, Tony Jones, and, and a lot of people feel the same way about this movie. And I'm sorry, I can go on and on
It's all
about how I
good.
feel
Go
about
back
this
into
movie.
the memory of going to go see it at the theater in Compton. What was so memorable about going to see it?
Can I jump in? Can I jump
Yeah,
in?
brother, please.
Just real quick. So talking about, watching Exorcist to kind of get a refresher and everything, I have Exorcist playing right now. So there's a mirror behind me that actually would show a reflection, but I have a blurred background. So, but I'm playing The Exorcist right now. It's at the part where she's yelling at the doctor. I'm sorry.
You're sorry? Jesus Christ, 88 doctors, and all you can tell me with all of your bullshit.
But and then as far as you talking about, oh, I didn't want to leave the house because I was afraid something bad was going to happen. I sure hope nothing bad happens to me as I'm watching this right now.
I would suggest a 10-minute cleanse before you put on some nice music or watch some wrestling for 10 minutes and then leave.
Right.
I don't think you should just go out into the wild without some kind of cleansing moment.
Right.
Like
I agree, man.
So yeah, here's what happened with us going to the Magic Johnson Theater in Compton. Tony Jones and I were working for the Urban Wrestling Alliance, correct?
I think it's the Alliance, yeah.
I think it was the
Urban
UW,
Wrestling Alliance.
or was it Federation?
No, it wasn't Federation. It was either I know it was UWA, but it was Association or Alliance. I think it was Alliance.
Alliance.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were working for the Urban Wrestling Alliance, which was a fantastic idea. I don't want to go off on a tangent about the Urban Wrestling Alliance because I still honestly think the idea would work. WWE and AEW, yeah, they've got a couple of characters that are very urban-esque, and they have multicultural wrestlers and stuff. But the idea behind urban wrestling was to have a hip hop product, and it got shut down for some. I think there was an issue with WWE owned Viacom or had a no compete clause with Viacom, and Viacom owned Black Entertainment Television, and so the whole project was kind of shut down after about a year. But it was a fantastic project, and Tony and I were working on this project together, and we had a day off, and the re-release of The Exorcist with deleted scenes was out. Mm-hmm. And Tony and I went down to the hotel concierge and we said, hey, where can we see this movie? And she said, oh gosh, guys, I'm really sorry, but it's not playing anywhere that you'd want to go. And we said, well, where is it playing? And she said, Compton, California. And we were like, well, yeah, it's a free country. We're going to go to Compton and watch at a Magic Johnson Theater and watch the re-release of Exorcist. And it kind of pissed me off that the concierge put like a negative connotation to it. Like somehow if we went to Compton, California, NWA and a bunch of other gangster guys were going to come out and shoot us in the fucking head and rob us. The thing is, you can go almost anywhere, and if you act right, you can get in and out of that place with no problem.
Pardon me. I wonder if you could tell me how to get back on the expressway. Hey, fuck your mama. Thank you very much.
So we went to the Magic Johnson Theater, and bet I was the only white cat in the whole theater. When I was there, I did see a white chick that was with a black dude. But I never felt threatened. No one looked at me crazy. There wasn't one issue the entire time we were there. Tony Jones and we went and watched the movie, and it was fantastic. The re-release, I honestly think, was better than the original. The deleted scenes should have never been taken out in the first place, especially her doing the crab spider walk up the stairs. I mean, that was, when I saw that, I was like, they cut that? Why would they cut that? That was sick. Uh, so yeah, man, we had a great time at the Magic Johnson Theater in Compton, California. I'd be interested to know if it's open still, because that was a fantastic place, but because of COVID and everything, it's theaters have been struggling, man.
It's really tough to find any theater that's not a chain. So
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably still there, but it's under a different name.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to think so.
yeah, I was excited to talk about this because this is a movie also that when I remember watching when I was younger, that scared the hell out of me. Probably because I grew up Catholic, so like that all that stuff was already ingrained in my brain from when I was a young kid. So seeing it play out on screen, a lot of the stuff with exorcism and everything like that, it freaked me out, and it still holds up when you watch it. I really do feel that way. I feel like the practical effects look great, and even if you think something doesn't look particularly realistic, I think by the time you get to those moments in the movie, the story's engrossing enough to where you're not really, like, you're kind of in the moment, you're like you're in the moment of the movie. You're not sitting there judging what looks real and what doesn't. You're just captivated by what's happening,
Dude, the acting is so strong in that movie. When I watched it, so my favorite vampire film is I believe it's 79, Dracula with Frank Langella and Sir Laurence Olivier. Are you fucking kidding me? Sir Laurence Olivier, right? You put him in a horror fucking film, of course. And Donald Pleasance is in that movie. Lots of great actors. And the movie is so well acted that it stands the test of time, even as a vampire film, you know? And you're right, man. This movie is so well acted. And one of the things I noticed about the movie is their use of sound volume. So there's a scene in the beginning when they find the idol, the winged idol, and the priest is kind of standing over here, and then you got the winged idol over here, and the desert, and the fucking wind's blowing. It's a sick looking scene, and then there's some dogs fighting, and this priest looks down, and there's these dogs that are starting to fight, and at first the shit is really kind of like mellow, but as the fight continues and the priest and the idol are staring at each other in this like standoff, the biting and the barking, the stuff, it starts getting louder. And they do it several times in the movie. When she first goes and gets a scan and she's put into the machine, as she's being like pulled into the machine, it's like maybe it's unbelievable, right? And then shortly after that, they do an X-ray, and she's like locked. First of all, she's locked in like Frankenstein. Like, what are they afraid she's gonna escape? She's like locked into this like reclined like thing, right? And there's this X-ray machine that's shooting around her. I'm sure at the time it was.
You know what I always thought about that though, when she was strapped in? When I was little and I saw that, I didn't think like, what are they trying to do? Keep her from escaping, right? When I was little, I was like, oh my God, she's going through so much pain, so much discomfort that she's just gonna want to just jump up or grab her face or do something, right? So they got you strapped in because they know you're gonna fight this, right?
Right.
Because I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what kind of I'm a little kid, right? But
exactly.
when I saw this as a kid, that's what I was thinking. I was kind of yeah.
Yeah, speaking of sound, they also like do other random things. Like I think there's a scene where they when they're showing something else, like off in the distance, they'll play like the sound of like bees buzzing really loud. Just something
Yes.
unsettling. Just like there's a lot of unsettling noises that they use to kind of like it keeps you on edge throughout the entire movie once everything starts kicking in.
100%.
I've done a lot of analyzing of this film, right? And something that they really utilize is they don't play music as much as a lot of other films, right? So there's a lot of iconic scenes in the film that don't have a soundtrack.
Well, yeah, when you think about the Exorcist theme, it doesn't play very often in the actual movie itself. You know, it's not like Jaws where you hear the Jaws theme all the time. Like the theme isn't throughout the movie.
You know, the scene, right? One of the most powerful scenes, you know, that just leaves everybody in awe, right? Is the scene with the crucifix, right? So that whole scene, right, from the point that the mother goes upstairs, she sees her with the crucifix, she attacks the mother, she throws the mother across the room, the furniture goes across the room, then the head spins around. No music or anything. That's all done silent.
Right, which is really interesting, dude, because I've watched films with soundtracks where they take the soundtrack out. Okay, like Jurassic Park was one of them, and you've got this classic Steven Spielberg orchestra kind of thing going on. They're driving the Jeep, trying to get away from the T-Rex and stuff, and when you don't have the music, it really negatively affects Jurassic Park. Okay. But this movie used it in a different way. The silence is creepy, to an unsettling point. Just I guess it's really interesting you say that, man, because it's the same way that they're using the volume increase. They use no sound at points, to create that same effect.
And the music that they use is subtle music, right? There's no like kind of a thing, right?
Right.
There's no shock in the music, right? It's the dun 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 dun, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's no like
Right.
jump scare.
Yeah, there's no jump scares in the music like they try to use, in other films, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of
Yeah,
the scene where
so
she gets
it's so effective, it doesn't need any of that. You
yeah.
see?
Right.
Speaking of the scene where she gets thrown across the room and everything, there's a whole bunch of backstory to that. Like she screwed up her back really bad. The young girl screwed up her back when she got thrown on the bed around. Like, I guess the
Okay,
stuntman.
so yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk about that, Paul. Okay, so there was an unexplained fire. People linked to the movie died. Okay, one of the extras was convicted of murder.
Yep, he's a serial killer.
Yes, yeah, serial killer, not just murder, but yeah, serial killer. Linda Blair was attacked. Cast members injured. You were talking about the little girl on the bed, right? The vomit scene went out of control. That whole thing was way overdone, and
it wasn't supposed to hit him in the face. It was supposed to just get him like right here. So his reaction in the movie is 100% real. He's like,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes. And a real exorcism was almost performed during this film. Like, dude, talk about a cursed movie. So then you wonder why I don't want to watch this film before I leave. Tony, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm kind of doing little things to kind of. Normally, I'll wear my Wrestling Dead T-shirt. They're amazing. Okay, normally that's what I'm wearing, but because you were on the show and you and I, we got this kind of classic thing going on. Okay, Tony keeps challenging me to matches. Now, I'm 52 years old, but since Beyond the Mat, since he lost, he's kind of a sore loser. So he's wanting that win, and so Tony keeps challenging me to these matches. The truth on that is, Tony and I, we both fantasize about getting that last match against each other, but ultimately, we both agree that it would be a bad idea at this juncture of our careers. But I do want to say this. I've said this to you many, many times, Tony. But I do want to say this right now on camera and on film, on podcast, on the Wrestling Dead. I do want to say that in a shoot, like an amateur shoot, Tony would fucking demolish me on any given day, any fucking day. And I'm a decent amateur wrestler. And Tony even gave me a great compliment one time. Tony said, "You have one of the strongest bases that I've ever dealt with in the referee's position. I've got a really strong base." And I remember one time Tony and I were shoot wrestling. I'm sorry, I digress off the film.
All good.
But Tony and I were shoot wrestling, and Tony got me, and I think it was a 3/4 power half, and I was fighting it, and effectively for a moment, and then Tony started walking it around. Where that's what people don't understand about amateur wrestling, is so much of it is body positioning and technique rather than strength.
Leverage.
Exactly. It's that leverage factor. And once Tony started walking it around, there was no stopping it. And my whole neck went just like that. And I was like, "Oh, fuck, brother." And I went over and I was like, "Oh, I'm fucked. I'm fucked." And Tony was like, "Oh, are you all right?" And it like tore something in my neck. Luckily, it wasn't anything that needed a doctor, but it was really, really tight for probably 3 months. But I did want to.
I remember, Mike. I remember that exact. I remember when that whole thing went down. But one thing you don't know, dude, is that when we got in there, I already madly respected you. I already saw you work in the ring. I had done a little bit of security. I had seen a couple of the shows, so I had already had a lot of respect for you. So by the time we had gotten into the ring, you already had my respect, no matter what happened, right?
You've always had my respect, Tony. I love you so
so
much.
I mean, straight up, brother. I mean, that's the honest truth. So it was almost like, okay, this is cool. Now I'm in here with Modest, right?
Right.
So,
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So that's the truth, brother.
Let's go back. Let's just finish up talking about the movie. I also thought one really interesting tidbit is the fact they actually film in Iraq, which is
Yes.
at the time still was not good to do. They actually had to get local political leaders there to allow them to film it there. They had to use, I think it was like an all Brit, the camera operators and everything had to be all British because they didn't want Americans.
Right.
And then they actually had to get local workers to be crew. And the deal was they would also teach like filming techniques to like the local residents who wanted to learn about it. So like,
neat.
Yeah. So
I didn't know. I totally did not know that part of it.
Which is like great. First of all, but also, what is the cachet that they had making this movie? But they're like, we're gonna go film in Iraq, and the studio's like, let's do it.
Yeah. Right. How much pull do you have?
Yeah.
What shenanigans were happening in Hollywood to pull that off?
Yeah, and it was also
I like how old. I like how
degrees.
old they made Max von Sydow look.
Yes.
That's what's funny, because when he showed up again in Star Wars in The Force Awakens, I remember being like, how old is Max von Sydow? And then you go back and realize that they put old age makeup on him in this movie. Because I remember sitting there being like, was he 110 years old? How is this possible?
Right. Wasn't he in Judge Dredd as well?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes. I think he was.
Yeah, he almost looks like today what he looked like in Exorcist.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like when it was like the same with like Christopher Lloyd in Back to the Future, where you're like, you realize they put a bunch of stuff on him to make him look older, and you're like, wait a minute, how old is Christopher Lloyd? Because then he was still in movies and TV shows in like the late 2000s, early 2000s, and then to now, and you're like, oh, okay, so they really aged him up in that movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy, because today, what they would do is they would just CGI you.
Yeah.
Or AI you, right? So.
Yep. But yeah, Exorcist, just we're not breaking new ground telling people that The Exorcist is a great movie, but
No.
It's one of those things where like if you haven't watched it in a while, you definitely should, because it still holds up. It's still phenomenal. And I think you'll notice new stuff. It's also interesting, the stuff like the flashes of the demon that happen throughout the movie, or the entity, or whatever you want to call them. Because like when the movie came out, there wasn't home video. So like you had to like go back to the theater and be like, did I see what I thought I just saw? And like you had to go back and look for it. You couldn't pause and rewind it.
Right. Yeah, at the time, again, another disturbing effect. It's one of those things that later you're going to be wondering, asking your wife, hey, did her face change like into like a hooded, creepy, diminished thing?
Yeah, there's like one scene where like
You
half
know?
of her face is like the demon
Yeah.
face. And
And
also
back in those days, they're probably wondering like, well, how much weed did we smoke and what was it laced with? You know?
I saw breakdowns on YouTube where people were like, "Oh, and this one, there's like a big thing of the statue actually in the house, but you have to turn the brightness up all the way just to see it." And I'm like, "That's why is it in the movie? That's insane."
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff
Um,
like that. Yeah.
so something that you said a little earlier when you said like, all the bad things that happened because of the movie and the movie's jinxed and all that kind of stuff, right? Not to change, stories here, but The Exorcist 3, I think, is the creepiest movie of all time because it's the movie that Jeffrey Dahmer used to watch, and like right before he killed his victims, he'd talk about the movie. He idolized the film. So Jeffrey Dahmer, oh yeah, look at any Jeffrey Dahmer story, and they bring up The Exorcist 3.
I had no idea about that.
Oh yeah, it's tied in how Jeffrey idolized the film. The last remaining victim, testified like, oh yeah, he put on The Exorcist 3. He used to say it was like his favorite film, and he would like critique it, and tell me this and tell me that about it. He was really into that film. That I was just like, oh wow. So that made the film so creepy to me, that this movie, because the movie is scary and it's creepy, right? But I'm like, dude, it spoke to Jeffrey Dahmer, right? So I'm like, that's the creepiest movie of all time to me.
I'm Michael Cariglio, and I hope you're enjoying The Wrestling Dead. Death seldomly comes invited. Should the unthinkable happen to you, will your family be taken care of? For information about life insurance or a career in financial services, please contact me at michaelcariglio@myyahoo.com.
Hi, wrestling fans. Mad Mikey here. Crash Holly. Aaron O'Grady. Johnny Pearson. And of the numerous names I've been over the years, I can't remember, it's been so long. But one thing I do know, picking a school that has credibility is something you need to do. There's a lot of schools out there that are pretty crappy. You can look on the internet, you can talk to people, it's about credibility. Pro Wrestling Iron is a place to be. I wouldn't be recommended if I didn't believe in it, if I wasn't a part of it. So please, check out Pro Wrestling Iron. At least they pay their taxes. There.
Well, hey man, let's talk about
All right.
our brother Crash Holly.
Yes. Michael Lockwood.
Michael Lockwood, very good friend of both myself and Tony Jones. Born August 25th, 1971, same year I was born. Died November 6th, 2003. And they have his suicide. They have it listed as suicide. His death listed as suicide, because he took lots of alcohol with prescription drugs. I actually don't think, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up, and of course I'm in no way trying to be disrespectful to my brother Mike, to Crash, or to Leprechaun, however you knew him as. At APW, he was the Leprechaun, Aaron O'Grady. But I'm going to set this up, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tony for a minute, and I'm going to go take a piss. That's what I'm going to do. While Tony finishes or talks a little more about this, but I honestly, it pisses me off a little bit that they have his death listed as a suicide. Mike, and when I first met him, I'm going to mention this name too, Johnny Pearson. When he wrestled first, he was Johnny Pearson. He wrestled for Woody Farmer, and Bay Area Wrestling, and he was Johnny Pearson. But when I from the time I first met him to the time he died, Mike Lockwood was a strong partner. He was one of those guys that, he would start, he'd take a couple of somas, drink a little alcohol, and that was the start. That was just to, start it up. And I honestly believe that Mike was depressed. He was going through a divorce with his stripper wife. Stripper wives will do that to you. Trust me, I've got my own stripper ex-wife. We never got officially married, but we were together 11 years and we have a daughter together. So I know how strippers behave. And Mike had married this stripper chick, and I'm not trying to fucking blast strippers. I love strippers, and strippers are great. But Mike had married this stripper chick. He was going through a divorce. He was having career issues. He was out of WWE and TNA, not making near as much money as he was before. And honestly, I think Mike was just trying to drink and pop a couple of pills to escape his reality for a moment.
And he's probably in a lot of pain too.
He was in a hell of a lot of pain. Yeah. Physical and mental. And and then
coming off of depression from losing his dream job too.
Right. Exactly.
You know how it is. When you're there, you're miserable.
100%.
When you're there, you're miserable, and when he leaves, he misses it. Right?
Yes. And 100%. Yeah, you're there, you're miserable, you leave, you miss it. Especially the money. And I think what happened was he started that self-medication, and it felt good. I think the first couple of pills he took and the first couple of drinks he took, I think it felt good. And I think he was like, well, shit, that feels good. I'm going to pop a couple more. And for Mike, someone who had been living his life that way for a period of time, an addict, or, I don't want to say an addict because I don't think he was addicted to any certain substance. I think he was more of an addict in escaping his reality. And I don't think it was a suicide at all. He was scheduled to come and be our head dude at Pro Wrestling Iron. We were going to base the entire company off of Mike, and because of his success with WWE, and also he was moving on to TNA, and we saw a definite, possibility to make a lot of money, and also for Mike to make some money and for him to feel better. He was excited about moving back to California. He was excited about being a part of Pro Wrestling Iron. And it was the night before he was moving back that he killed himself on accident. It wasn't a suicide. It was an accidental thing. It was an accidental overdose, is what I believe it was. And it kind of pisses me off that people say suicide. Mike was not trying to kill himself. There's no way you can convince me of that. So, Tony, I'm going to go take my piss. And Mike would like that, actually. So I want to say that again. That that's in no way disrespect. In fact, it's a bit, in a way, it's an honor of him, because I'm having a drink right now, and I gotta take a piss.
Yeah. Actually, I gotta be in the bathroom right now. I gotta go do something, snap one out. But anyways, Pro Wrestling Iron is a school to be at. I'm here for the bathroom.
Well, I do not think he killed himself, and I'm actually rather upset, or at least was very upset when I first heard that they ruled it a suicide, because I thought that cheated his daughter out of any kind of insurance, because a lot of times they won't insure you when you commit suicide, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was in a way, screwing his daughter out of what, she may had coming to her. Who knows? I don't even know if he had an insurance policy, but if he did, something like that ruled as a suicide can affect that, right? So that's the first thing I really didn't like about it being ruled a suicide. And then I thought, that's wrong.
Yeah, dude, that makes a lot of sense, Tony. I never even thought about I didn't ever even think about it from that perspective.
Right.
I always thought I just thought of it as that I fucking know it wasn't a suicide. That's the only angle. But yeah, that's a really good point. I never even thought about it from that angle.
Yeah. So so that's kind of like what bothered me most, right? And then when I thought about it, I said that it's not true also, right? Because like you said, I saw Crash drink a lot, And I remember one time in particular, we're having, and you know, you remember a lot of this better than I do, Mike, but there, we had a party at the gym, and it was when Damian Steele came up for the first time, and I think Crash was there, and I remember Crash, and I think it was a Christmas party. It was a Christmas party at APW's gym, and we had Damian Steele there. He had come up for this, and I'm not even sure if you were there. Excuse me. I'm not even sure if you were there, but
Damien Steele, that was from XPW, correct?
yeah, yeah, Tim, you know Tim, yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, I saw Crash walking around with a big bottle of Southern Comfort, and I mean he's just walking around with it in his hand, you know, and you know we didn't think much of it, but I remember him just drinking it and drinking it and drinking it. So you know he was a heavy drinker. So you know when I heard it was pills mixed with a lot of liquor, and they said it was suicide, I said no, I think he probably just drank too much and forgot how many pills he took. And that seemed most likely to me. So, and you know, just knowing how he takes pills, and not just him, but a lot of the boys, you know, and not even the boys, just people in general. I mean, you know, the average housewife is popping pills. You know what I mean? So, you know, and he had legitimate reason to pop pills because I mean, he did. I can't remember. I was so proud of him and everything. I'm still proud of him for everything he accomplished. I mean, he was out there for a while, like maybe 4 years, something like that. And he got a push with Bob Holly and got the tag team titles. I think they went over on The Rock. I think it was The Rock and Mick Foley or something. It was some tag team. It was The Rock and somebody, and they went over. And I remember I couldn't believe it. I was so proud of him. And you know, he bumped around, you know, with Brock Lesnar and all this kind of stuff. So you can't tell me the guy wasn't hurting and he wasn't in pain, right? So I'm sure he was taking legitimate pills for legitimate reasons. But, you know, he took too many pills because after a while, you know, you get numb from the pills and then you forget how many you take and then you start drinking and next thing you know,
He was by himself.
he kills you, you know?
I guarantee if he wasn't by himself that night, the Crash would be alive today.
Mm-hmm.
If he had somebody there to say, yo, bro, you're partying way too hard, slow it down. You know what I mean? He got fired from, I think it was ECW. He got fired from there for throwing up on merchandise. He got too drunk and he threw up on a bunch of merchandise and he ended up getting fired from ECW.
So to me, it's like he has a regurgitation problem when he drinks, right? And then he probably fell down on his back, right? When he probably passed out or he choked and he fell down, and when he fell down, maybe he hit his head and he choked on his vomit, right? Now, 'cause that's what they ruled it as, right? Like he basically choked up. He choked on his vomit is what they said, right?
Well,
so to me, that seems like an accident. You see what I mean? That's not suicide. That's not suicide, you know.
It's also you know in wrestling, specifically like it's also just very very commonplace to kind of just you know to deal with all the pain from all the bumps and all the you know the stuff you guys put your bodies through. Like I remember when I was there for King of Indies and I was doing like camera work there, and I remember hanging out in the hotel like with a bunch of the wrestlers, and there's guys who I'm not gonna drop names, but there are dudes who are still on TV on major networks today who are all just like pulling random pills out of their bags and being like, try this one. No, you try this one. You try this one. You know what I mean? Like, oh, your neck's fucked up. Oh, do this one. Take this one instead. And you know, like I said, they're like, you know, prescription pills that they're just like pawning off on each other. Like, hey, you know, this is just, hey, try this one. How about this one? You know, and you're like, oh shit, like this is crazy. Like this is just, and it's very normal. No one's like being like, oh, you know, hey man, just so you know, like it was all just like, hey, you know what I mean? It's just very commonplace and normal.
I want to talk about a match that I had that I believe is on YouTube with Crash Holly. He is the Leprechaun Aaron O'Grady in the match. And if you want to check it out, that's some early Crash Holly before he was Crash Holly. He, at one point in the match, he gets out of the ring, runs up some stairs, climbs over and steps up on a banister on a balcony and does a cross body off of the balcony banister onto. Also, a funny little side note that is you know just about that match is that he had posted a picture of a girl with a goofy smile on the ceiling of the APW garage. And I don't know, I honestly really don't know how he got up there, because we didn't have a ladder that reached all the way up to the ceiling of the garage. But somehow he got up there and he stapled this picture of this girl with a goofy smile. And during the match, he takes me over in a headlock, and he goes, before the match, he says, "Hey man, I got a surprise for you." And I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, the girl that really likes you. She's hot for you." And I was like, "Oh, really? Cool." So we get out there, and I'm trying to find the girl. He's like, "Did you see her? Did you see her? You can see her where you're at." And it was every time I was on my back, he would say, "Well, do you see her?" You know. And I didn't see her through the whole fucking match until he finally said, "She's looking right at you on the fucking roof." And I look up there, and he went through great expense to you know, get up there and put this picture of a girl with a really fucking stupid smile, uh, just to entertain me in a match that we were having. Like, that's the kind of guy he was. He was a great guy, man. Super good friend, and I love him very much, and still miss him. Tony, you got any stories about Crash you want to share?
Yeah. I remember one thing in particular I wanted to kind of bring up, and I was thinking about this when we said we're going to talk about Crash, and I said, dude, we have to talk about that match, you and I against Vic and Crash, where Vic sets the gym on fire.
Oh,
Right? Good one,
yeah,
right? Good
yeah,
one. I'll let
yeah.
you tell it a little bit better than I do, and you go ahead and tell some of it, and I'll fill in the gaps, because when it actually went down, you were paired off with Vic, and I was paired off with Crash, and
All I the only thing I remember about the match is the end.
yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah, that's all that really mattered, because we
yeah,
got to the end, and that's when it really went off the rails.
yeah. The deal was that
Well, tell them it was me and you against Vicious Vic Grimes and
Crash Holly
Crash Holly. Yeah.
and Vic was supposed to, at some point, set the table on fire and go to suplex me through the table that was on fire. And I had told him to use lighter fluid, because the lighter fluid burns kind of like from the fume. It burns off of the table. And, I told him, get some lighter fluid, spray one line, and, there'll be a little fire. It won't be a big deal. It'll be easy. And the deal was that he was going to suplex me through it, but I wouldn't take that shit. And so since I wouldn't take that shit, Vic was the one that was going to bump through the fire. And so Tony was going to come and save me. And then we were going to suplex Vic into the fire. And Vic instead got kerosene, and he fucking soaked the table with kerosene. And when he lit it up, man, this flame.
I have the match on video. Remember, I posted it on Facebook a couple of
Yeah.
years ago. I have the match on video. You see Vic, and he's just like he's just going like this,
pouring it all over there. And when he lights it, it goes whoosh. Like there was this big, loud fucking whoosh, and the flames went fucking way up. And Tony and I decided that it was too dangerous for Vic to bump into. We were afraid that Vic would get badly burned. There was way too much fucking fire for this kind of thing.
Did he have the long hair?
Yeah, he had the
Did he have
long hair
at the time?
Yeah,
and the spandex tights over his whole body.
the kerosene would have gotten his hair, would have got all over his outfit. It would have been bad news all around.
I'm going to tell you this: it would have prevented the New Jack fall from the scaffold match, because Vic probably wouldn't have been wrestling after that. And so Tony and I, we decided we're not going to put Vic through the table. And so then Vic is trying to push himself off.
We're trying to double suplex him back into the ring, and he's resisting.
We're trying to get him into the ring because we don't want him to bump into the table. We're like, no, dude, this is fucking bad. This is bad news. So we're trying to suplex him in, and he's fighting us.
And it's a shoot suplex.
Luckily,
We're trying to shoot this suplex.
yes,
We're trying to muscle him back into the ring to
over
avoid
the fucking
him
top
catching on
rope.
fire. Yeah.
And luckily, Tony and I are the physical specimens that we are, and we were able to muscle that 400 fucking pound psychopath up over the fucking thing and get him into the ring into safety.
You see it on video too. You see his
Yeah.
legs are way down. We're
Oh, yeah.
muscling him over. I mean, he's just dead weight.
Yes. And then we get in the locker room, and he was all butthurt about it. He was so sad that Tony and I wouldn't let him go through the fire. He was sulking, and I go, Vic, what's wrong with you? And he goes, well, I feel like the people are really let down. I really wanted to go through that fire. And I was like, Vic, like, dude, if you'd done it fucking normal with one fucking line of lighter fluid, it had been a little flame this fucking big, and as soon as you hit it, it fucking goes out. But when you use a fucking quart of kerosene, it's a whole different environment. It's a whole different vibe. Something else I want to say about Crash is not only was he like just a fantastic guy, but so he trained originally with Woody Farmer, and Crash threw drop kicks kind of the other way. Right. If you look in pro wrestling, everyone kind of leads off of the left foot and jumps up with the drop kick, boom, and circle around. Crash went off the right foot and threw the drop kick the opposite way.
Roland didn't like that too.
Roland hated that.
Roland put him back in training camp, right? Because he said he needs to be retrained.
Right. What happened was, so Roland, when Roland started APW and stuff, Woody Farmer already had Bay Area Wrestling, and Jerry Monty had Pacific Coast Championship Wrestling going on. And APW immediately started really doing some shit. We were doing a lot of shows, whereas the other companies were doing one every 3 or 4 months. APW was doing a lot of shows. And it drew a lot of guys from other companies to come over to APW. So Johnny Pearson, Crash Holly, Mike Lockwood, came over to APW and had a tryout with Roland. Roland hated some of those, habits that he had that Roland viewed as like negative, and so Roland wanted him trained like the APW way. And at first, Crash or Mike was a little insulted because he kind of looked at Roland as kind of like here's this promoter telling him he's got to be retrained, but he's already been a professional wrestler for a while now, working matches on television with Woody Farmer's Bay Area Wrestling. And but Crash swallowed his pride and got retrained with APW. Never fixed his drop kick ever. I basically just told Crash, I was like, look, man, just play the political game. Like, I know you're fucking good and you don't necessarily need to be retrained, but just play the political game. You get into the company, you'll be pushed quick. And which Roland did. Roland pushed him almost immediately. And it led to him being a superstar and, an invaluable part of the growth of all pro wrestling.
I remember doing kind of like having a similar conversation with him, right? And I remember him telling me, it was like, I got a gimmick pretty much all put together already. And I said, oh, what's your gimmick? And he said, I'm doing a leprechaun gimmick. And I said, oh, okay. He goes, yeah, I've already done it a few times. It gets over pretty good. I come out and I have like this pot of gold and I have like these little chalk, because he worked at Safeway, right? Like out where I live, right? So he worked at Safeway. So he said he got a deal on like all these gold chocolate candies that look like silver dollars, right?
Right.
So he said, oh, I got bags of the stuff at home. So I come out with a pot of gold with the candy and I throw it out to the kids and it really gets over well. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I said, these guys really get their gimmicks all figured out. Because I used to think it was like, the promoters just pushing all the buttons. But,
But you were thinking right.
yeah, these guys are coming to the table with their own ideas, right?
That's the funny part, though. You had it right, Tony. So, like, most of the time, it's the company, it's the writers that come up with a gimmick for you and this and that. It's a rare occasion that they will take you on your own gimmick,
Right.
which is why I'm such a badass, because WCW and Noah both signed me as Michael Modest, my own gimmick, my own fucking personality that I came up with by myself. Actually, I'm going to take that back. It was kind of a nickname given to me by the boys because Rick Thompson was the head instructor, and Rick really liked me, and I had already done a lot of training with Rick, so I knew a lot of the things that Rick was teaching. So when I would do it, Rick would go, yeah, do it like Mike. And the do it like Michael Jordan commercials were a thing then. And so when Ricky would say, oh yeah, do it like Mike, the guys would kind of roll their eyes and they would say, oh yeah, you're so perfect, and I kind of get embarrassed. I am actually not a person who is comfortable with praise at all. I don't like it when people tell me I'm good at something or I'm good at this or that. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. I don't like it. And so when the boys would kind of give me this, oh yeah, Rick, you're fucking doing it perfect. We're gonna all do it like you. It would embarrass me. And so a lot of the guys kind of keyed in on that. They started saying, oh, you're so modest, you're so humble, And I thought Mike Modest sounded a lot better than Mike Humble. Double M is way better than image.
Yeah. So when going back to Crash, right? When he had told me the gimmick, right? I was like, oh, that sounds really good. That gets over well, right? And he goes, yeah, and I've even gotten it figured out for when I go heel. And I said, oh, how do you do that? He said, so I grow my facial hair out and I come out and I have this mean look on my face. And now I don't want you to touch my pot of gold. So now I'm sitting there and I'll fake throwing the gold out to the kids. And then they get mad. They start coming to me and they want the gun. No, you can't have this pot of gold. And I was just like, dude, that's brilliant.
Yeah,
I was really like upset that when they brought him in. I mean, I was happy for him, but I was like, dude, somebody's gonna grab this gimmick and totally. I mean, remember Fit Finley a few years later started doing some kind of remember
yes.
he had Hornswoggle and they kind of did a kind of a leprechaun gimmick, but they never did the pot of gold and throwing the candy and
right.
I thought that and then do it as a heel and don't give it to him. I thought that was just so good. Nobody ever utilized it.
Right. You could even have, the baby face could knock you out, grab some of your points, and go to give it to a couple.
And give it to kids.
Go get it back. Go and take it back and put it back in your.
Exactly. Kids unwrap it. Right, they got your candy because Babyface gave it to them, and as you're leaving the ring, the kids are throwing the wrapper at you, and now they got the candy and they're eating. There's just you can do so much with that.
Sure.
Speaking on that about him coming up with a gimmick and everything, like I always thought that was really interesting too, is that when he first got into WWE or WWF at the time, and then when he like fit in very quickly. Like he was a natural, and especially at the time and now, of course, still it's very entertainment based. It's very much like you have to, if they give you a character, you have to be able to run with it. You have to be comfortable on camera. You have to be able to do everything. And he was so adept at doing all those things, like right from the get-go when he was there. It was actually,
I think the number one thing for Crash that he had going for him, where he really fit in, and I actually just saw his debut on WWE just a couple of weeks ago. It popped up, like on a feed, right? And you see Bob Holly announcing, I got a guy who's going to be coming out, and Bob Holly is standing there just jacked, right? I mean, just looks like $1 million, and he's talking about, I'm bringing this guy out, and all of a sudden here comes Crash, and Crash looks like $1 million. He looks great, right? Just a smaller version of Bob Holly, but he completely has the body, right? And it's like, I think his line was, don't start something that you can't finish, right? So then he gets hit and he takes the bump, and now you see, okay, these are cousins that fight, right? So, so he came in with this good storyline.
We've all had that cousin or that friend that they're our best friend, but we're going to slug it out every once in a while.
Right. So he comes in with a good storyline, right? And then he fits right in because he's small, but he's got the body, right? It just wouldn't have worked if he was like this smaller guy that, thin, didn't really have a body, and here he is, cousin of Bob Holly. The fact that he was like a miniature version of Bob Holly,
Yeah.
it was perfect, and Crash's body really played a part in there. He came to us like that. So that was really important during our time, right? And we worked on our bodies, right? But I think that was a big thing for him. That's what really got him to the dance. He was small, but he really was physically fit.
Yeah.
Oh, even now without a refresher, I can picture his strut with the weight machine. His is just like
with the scale,
yeah, with the scale.
He got scale, and he'd say that he was 400 pounds, and he'd get on there.
But just the way he would walk to the ring,
which was a reverse, right? Which I know you love, Mike, which is a reverse, Buddy Rose, right?
Yes.
Right? Buddy Rose would be like, they're 240 pounds,
217 pounds, but he was 271.
Yeah, 217 pounds, right?
Yeah.
So it was like backwards, right? So they said like 160, like 360, right?
Yeah. Right.
So it was just a different way of doing it, but it was brilliant,
Yes.
and he was part of that huge time where now it's kind of more of a joke with the whole 24/7 title and all that. But back when like they established a hardcore title, and then they made it that you had to defend it 24 hours a day, like that was such an entertaining portion, and he was all over that.
Yes.
They made a DVD back in that time. That's how big Crash got. I think it was a Hardcore Championship DVD, and I'll never forget it because I remember going out and getting it because I'm like, oh, maybe Crash is going to be all over this. And I mean, he's pretty much in it's a 45-minute documentary, and I think he's in it for like 35 minutes.
Yeah, he has
It's basically his documentary.
He has 22 Hardcore Championship reigns.
Yeah.
Hell yes. Yes, Crash, you did it, my brother. Mike, you did it. We love you so much. I want to say one more thing before we close this episode, man. The splash he used to do, because at 360 pounds, you don't have to go to the top rope. A bottom rope splash is enough at 360 pounds. And that was his spot that he came up with. He'd get to the top rope, and then he'd go, no, go down to the second. He'd go, no, and then he'd go down to the first, and he'd jump off and do the splash. Now, I want to say this, so Crash was trained old school, okay? And old school training is that you have a bump card, and that bump card has an indeterminate number of bumps on it. You don't get to know how many bumps your card has. Everyone's got a different amount of bumps on their card. And Crash was very aware of that card. And so Crash, even though he was smaller, he was a very, very smart worker. And he didn't want to take unnecessary bumps or do unnecessary damage to his body. He was in it for the long haul.
I forgot about that, Mike. You're right.
He wanted to make that money for a long period of time. When I watch wrestling nowadays, man, and there's certain guys that just blow me away. Don't get me wrong. Everything they're doing is phenomenal. But here's the thing. Your bump card is going to be very, very short. If you are doing the crazy shit every night that you work, and you're risking life and limb every night, you are going to have a very short career. You might be a legend, but you will definitely experience some huge disappointments in your life. Crash was a master at entertaining people without abusing his body more than necessary. And that splash is a perfect example of it. Here's a guy that is 190 pounds. Like Crash was never over 200 pounds, I don't think.
He might have got there when he got to WWE.
Possibly.
But not with us. Yeah.
Right. He might have been maybe 205 or something like that with WWE. Okay. But here's a guy at 205 pounds that's making a fucking living in the industry and doing a killing, making great money, doing a splash off the bottom rope.
Yep.
Now I'm going to tell you, you think you're a badass, you think you're like some high flyer and shit, make some money doing a fucking splash off the bottom rope. Figure out how to make that fill those seats. And you got a real professional. Crash was 100% a professional. He understood that this is a business, and every bump you give has a price on it. And I love you, Mike, and we miss you tremendously. And
did he ever go over with you about why he was let go by WWE or anything, or did they give him a reason?
No, so it wasn't that he was not necessarily let go. What happened was his contract ran out. Okay. And Crash called me and told me that he was basically going to do a power play because his contract ran out and he was working without a contract, and TNA was kind of doing their thing. Crash's idea was that he could use that to make more money with WWE. So he kind of went into the office to talk to them about his contract, and he kind of did it the wrong way. He was like, well, I've been, I've got other options, which WWE knows that that's TNA. And then WWE basically said, oh, okay, well, if you have other options, then go ahead and do that. And now it's your pride. Do you go, I was just fucking with you. I don't have other options. I'll take whatever fucking peanuts you throw at me.
Yeah.
Instead, Crash went and tried to negotiate something good with TNA, and that really didn't happen. He did have something with them, and it was going to be ongoing. It wasn't going to pay the bills that he needed to pay, and it was going to give him what he need, but it wasn't going to give him the life that he was already experiencing.
So I got sent to the WWE Developmental Center, right, over in Connecticut, and this is like back in like '99 or something. So they sent me out there to train for like 3 days with Dr. Tom Pritchard, right? So I'm in there, Batista, Alpha Jr., I think was his name, and then this other kid, Sean something, and he did some stuff like in Atlanta. He was pretty good. So I think there was like four of us, right? And I remember us sitting down and Tom Pritchard just like lecturing us, and he was so cool. He was like a real good trainer and a gentleman, right? And he's like going over some stuff, and he talks about guys that are successful and guys that are not too successful, right? And he basically said that when you come in and you have a great attitude and everything, that's how you can get a contract. That's how you keep your contract. He goes, Crash Holly, right? He said, if you come in and you don't have, your shit together and you have a big mouth, that's how you don't get a contract. And he said, Vicious Vic Grimes. And I was shocked because he looks right at me and he goes, those are your boys, right, Tony?
Both of them, yeah.
Right. He looks at me and he goes, those are your boys, right, Tony? And I was like, yeah, yes, sir. And he said, yeah. So those are perfect examples of do's and don'ts. And Crash, as time went on, I started to hear about Crash, right? That he grew bitter, right? And remember when he was with us, Crash was always that miserable guy, right? He would always be kind of just, and so when he went to WWE, he was upset about this and upset about that. And I think he was telling everyone, right? I'll never forget him calling me up at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I had my girlfriend, we were just sitting there watching TV. We were just up, right? And I get a call from Crash and he's drunk. And he told me he had Stevie Richards with him and a bunch of the WWE guys, and they're at a bar. And he was just talking about how much this whole life sucks. And he was just like, Tony, remember when we used to hang out in APW and we sit up in the bleachers and we talk about wanting to make it in WWF? I said, yeah. He goes, we didn't know what we were talking about, dude. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. Right. And I'll never forget that, right? So I remember him just always, not happy about things, right? Probably talking to the boys, right? So I heard when his contract came up, they didn't want to renew his contract. They were like, I think, it'd be good for you to, for us to mutually part ways. And at that point, Crash was already miserable, and Crash had figured, you know what, I'm just going to go to TNA. And he already thought he was going to start his training facility, right? That training facility of training wrestlers, right? So he was with this chick, right? So he thought, okay, no problem. Let's mutually part, right? And that's what I had heard from Crash, right? And then I saw a shoot interview, that's what he said. And then I can't remember who else. I thought I heard it from Pritchard, Bruce Pritchard also. But Tom talked about Crash coming in and just doing everything right and having the right attitude, and that's how you get a contract. So he used Crash as an example. And then I heard as time went on, Crash just started getting kind of bitter and didn't like where he was placed on the card. And then he started being the job guy. Like, when guys would come in, they'd feed Crash to them, right? So as time went on, he just started getting kind of miserable and getting banged up. And I remember one thing in particular he told me he said, Tony, you're home for your kids, right? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, yeah, I haven't been to my daughter's birthday in like 3 years.
Right.
So, all that kind of stuff would like weigh on his mind. You know what I mean? So he was miserable, and he would talk about it. And I think that's how he lost his deal.
I had a conversation with Bison Smith in Japan, and it was the same sort of thing. Like I hadn't spent a Christmas, an Easter, a birthday, um, Thanksgiving, like all holidays I had missed with my kids for like multiple years. And I told Vic, I said, you know what I'm realizing about this business? Like, even though now I'm making a living at it, yeah, I'm making money and stuff. My happiest days in this business were training. Be when you had a regular job and you were training to be in the business was honestly some of the funnest times I ever had in the industry.
That chase is
yes, yeah.
the chase is the fun. You know what I mean? The dream. Once you've caught something, it's not as fun, right? And once you need to depend on it for a living, then it really takes the fun out of it. Because now it's about survival. It's about your standard of living, right? I was like, why am I staying in this crappy hotel, right? Why can't I afford this? And why can't I afford that? And you see other people are doing better than you, right? So then you start getting a little bitter, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Hey, Mike, we love you. Crash Holly, God bless you, brother. Rest in peace. Hope your daughter's doing well. I know he's got one daughter, and I hope she's doing well. And
I want to make a plug out there for remember Molly Holly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Nora, I think her name is. I did a show in UPW, and this is after Crash had passed. And I did a show at UPW, and she had done the show with me, and she knew who I was. Said, Crash, talked highly of you and everything, So, we started talking and everything, and she told me how she had wrote a book. And this book probably came out, maybe a year or two after Crash passed. And she said how she had wrote a book, and that a portion of the proceeds is going to go to Crash's daughter, because she confirmed. I thought she was such an angel for that, right? Because she said, he gave me my big break because she came in as Molly Holly, right? So, and he was really nice to me on the road, and he was this and he was that. And when he died, his daughter got cheated out of insurance. And so she said that she wanted to do what she could to help. And I remember looking at her, I was like, wow, you're a real angel. That's very sweet. She said, oh, it's the least I could do. But yeah, I just wanted to give a plug out to her because I think she's a total sweetheart, and I know she's
the forgotten member of the Hollies.
Yeah. So she, right on for her for looking out for Crash's daughter.
Oh yeah.
Also a really great worker for women's wrestling in a time when women's wrestling was really not appreciated in WWF at all.
Right.
Love you, Mike.
Love you, brother.
Naked Pro Wrestling. Oh, now I got to tell that story. Hold on. Wait, Jesse. You're not done yet. Jesus. We're really sorry, brother. So there was this one night, Crash Holly and I We were at APW Garage. There was a show happening the next day. So the ring truck was already pulled into the garage. The ring was already loaded. Crash and I did most of the ring loading because we had planned on being there for the whole night. We were going to get drunk after we loaded the ring. So we load the ring and we get fucking really drunk. At some point, I went to sleep or passed out, one or the other. And I was awoken by these fucking sounds. It sounded like thunder. Like, and I hear Crash yelling. I hear Mike yelling about something. And I get up and I look out the window of my little apartment in the garage, and I see Crash is taking bumps on the top of the wrestling truck or the ring truck. And he's naked and he's doing schoolboys and handspring bumps on the top of the ring truck. And he's yelling, NPW heavyweight champion. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? He says, Naked Pro Wrestling. He goes, I've got an idea. He goes, we're going to make some money, Mike. He slides off the truck. Now I start coming down the stairs. I'm like, brother, it's time to go to bed, man. We gotta wrestle tomorrow. And he slides down off the truck and he opens the APW garage. This is about, I don't know, 2 a.m. And he runs outside of the garage and he starts bumping in the grass and he's yelling, Naked Pro Wrestling, NPW. He's taking these bumps in the grass. And now, don't ask me why these ladies were there at 2 a.m. because to this day, it eludes me. But there were 3 old ass ladies. I'm talking like 70 plus minimum. Okay. There was 3 old ass ladies, and we were in an industrial park where APW was. So there's no reason at all for 3 old ladies to be in the industrial park at 2 a.m., but they were there. And they were getting into their car and they look over and they see this naked Crash Holly, Mike's bumping in the fucking grass in PW. But yeah, we love you, Mike. Naked Pro Wrestling forever, brother. God bless you.